Nakabahang kakalat pa ito sa iba pang bayan sa Batangas, kabilang na ang mga dinarayong beach doon.
Ito ay critical na source ng ating pagkain. Hindi lang ng pagkain, kundi yung talagang yamang dagat na majority ay merong importanteng ecological roles and functions. So, protection of this Verde Island Passage is very important for both biodiversity and our food source.
This is beyond our control. So, mahalaga doon ay handa tayo. Alam natin, handa tayo, handa ang in coordination with the community and of course, with other government agencies.
Between noon and 4 p.m. Monday, the Philippine Coast Guard confirmed that the oil spill in Mindoro has reached the Verde Island Passage in Batangas. And then another announcement from the Philippine Coast Guard that there are no more traces of oil in the marine reserve waters. Still, as the PCG says, it's a race against time to contain the leakage that has already taken its toll on the health and livelihood of thousands in affected communities. Will there be a breakthrough soon in the cleanup operations or the search for the sunken empty Princess Empress? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs. And it's a Monday edition of The Chiefs. I'm Ed Lingao. Joining me in the studio, Robbie Alampayo of One News. And of course, online from Manila, Ana Maria Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star. And from Quezon City, Lucy Gus Valdez, the head of News 5. Well, happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
And we're a full house again.
Tama.
That's
Welcome
good.
back.
Okay, welcome back to everybody. Okay, Ami, start off with you. What's your banner story tonight?
The ultimatum, 24 hours kay Representative Arnolfo Tetes. Kaya lang, hindi ko sigurado ko anong pwedeng gawin sa kanya, no?
Ayun
ano
nga
bang
eh.
gagawin sa awol na congressman?
But what
Pwede
could
palang
ano?
10, ano raw di ba? Suspension, 10 araw, or kung may 2/3 vote ng Congress, pwede raw masipa, no?
At saka telling yon na, while he's not here, he requested to be able to deliver a privileged speech while still away and dinecline ng House of Representatives.
Yun nga tinatanong ang abogado niya, no? Si Ferdinand Topacio. Ano daw bang diferensya kung magsasalita siya by Zoom or ano, yung naka-live stream or bakit daw gustong personal? Ayan, tinitingnan natin kung anong kalalabasan yung argumentong yan.
Ayan, at mukhang mahaba pa yan. The other story today, dumating today yung ROV, yung remotely operated vehicle to be used for, it's only for the ocular, as far as we can tell, only for the ocular of, finding and of course possibly the ocular of the empty Princess Empress.
And we'll have to wait a few days. I mean, based on the news reports, it will take still about 3 or 4 days to get some initial data out of this. And even as hopefully for sure we'll get into some of that later on. But for people, it's running on, going on 2 weeks already. Pero ito, nandito pa lang tayo sa stage. Kanina nga nung tinanong, parang is this too late? Ang sagot na lang is, well, this is better than nothing.
Grabe naman targets
na. Di ba? Wala. Parang hindi pa rin alam di ba? Tinutukoy pa rin kung this is going to be the first time to really, quote-unquote, lay eyes on where exactly the ship is.
And we're hoping that in the meantime, gumagalaw na yung move to get an ROV that can plug up the hole and suck up the oil. Because that is going to take time.
Harapin na sa Verde Island Although sinabi ng
oil
Coast Guard,
sheen.
Sabi ng Coast Guard ngayon daw later in the afternoon nawala yung oil sheen.
So,
pero
ano pala?
na rin po, diba?
Baka
nag-break apart siya, no? Nag-break apart, iba yung nasabi ng marine scientist, pero nandun pa rin yung pollution. Yan ang problema.
Well, that's the thing with oil. It gets broken up by wave action and the sunlight, a combination of both. But only to a certain degree. And then it takes time for it to break up further down.
Toxic pa rin siya, di ba?
Yeah, in the meantime, it still is toxic. Anyway,
We're approaching pa naman beach season, ha?
Oo nga,
Diba?
yan ang problema.
I mean, yun ang malungkot eh. Kaya,
pero,
Ang dami ng beaches na nasira.
pero okay na siguro, si Lucy nakapag-beach na eh.
ano ba nalaman nasa beach ako? Bakit? Meeting ba ako?
Journalist kami, journalist.
Baka daw umabot hanggang Boracay, ano? Kapag hindi
I know.
naagapan. Nako.
Well,
Puerto Galera ang pinaka nakakatakot.
Sayang,
Puntahan niya yan pag Holy Week. Diba,
Sayang.
Puerto Galera?
well, umabot nga
Sayang.
ng umabot nga ng Taytay, Palawan which is on the other side of Mindoro Island.
Yes. Oo nga.
That actually was surprising eh. But anyway, we bring in our first guest right after this very short break, so the Chiefs will be right back. Almost a month since the oil spill began, authorities are nowhere near identifying the location of the sunken MT Princess Empress or just how much industrial oil it is leaking. What can be done next? And joining us on the program is Daniel Ocampo, the Senior Campaign Manager of Environmental Group Oceana. Magandang gabi, Mr. Ocampo, and welcome to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi po.
Magandang gabi po.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us tonight. Sir, of course, a lot of concern and worry over sana umabot yung oil spill. We are getting conflicting reports. From your own monitoring, sir, do you know more or less how much has been spilled out already and where it has reached?
We are actually monitoring the oil spill sa aming Karagatan Patrol. Isa tong online platform na ginamit namin for reporting illegal fishing, but now we calibrated it for crowdsourcing sa mga areas na nakakapansin ng oil slick and yung mga dumadagsa ng mga tar sa shore. No? As far as we know, furthest south so far is Taytay sa Palawan. Tapos dito naman sa norte, yung last report namin really is Isla Verde. Pero kanina, yung contact namin sa Tingloy, which is another island municipality in Batangas, sabi nila, may napapansin na daw yung mga maing isda doon sa laot ng Barangay Corona. Ito yung lugar sa gitna ng Puerto Galera, Isla Verde, at yung island municipality ng Tingloy. So medyo malawak na nga yung nararating, pero marami pa rin nagtatanong talaga kung gaano ba karami na yung lumabas na langis? Yung langis bang lumabas ay yung fuel ng barko o yung kargamento na? Yung modeling ng UP Marine Science Institute, which is also sharing sa Karagatan Patrol, sabi nila ay tinatansya nila mga 20,000 liters per day. Pero yun nga, gaya ng nabanggit kanina nung nagsimula yung programa, no, na hindi malinaw kung ano na ba yung state ng barko doon sa ilalim at kung ano talaga yung lumalabas na langis at gaano karami. So maraming unknowns eh. Sana nga yung mga tanong na yun nasagot na agad as soon as nag-sink yung barko in a few days. Para yung response na ginagawa natin ngayon on the ground is really alam natin kung have we seen the worst or we should prepare for what's coming. So yun yung mga tanong na kinakailangan sagutin. Even sa forum namin kaninang umaga, yun pa rin yung tanong na umiikot kasi hindi nga malinaw kung ano yung estado na ngayon ng yung mga langis na tumatagas.
Mr. Ocampo, could you expound a bit pagka sinabi niyong we're crowdsourcing tapos kung saan-saan na napapansin. Ano yung range nun? Pagka sinabi niyo yung napapansin, what does that mean? Naamoy all the way to nakikita nilang buo-buo yung langis. I mean, what are the different ways by which people are noticing this and sensing na umabot na sa kanila?
Actually, iba-iba yan eh. Kasi for example, doon sa may pinuntahan namin yung Pola last week na alam natin isa yun sa unang naabutan ng oil spill. Dito medyo nabawasan na yung light fuel na nadadala nung malakas na hangin ng amihan last time. Tapos ang nandyan ay yung mga tinatawag nilang tar patties at tar balls. Ito yung mabigat na component ng langis, yung naiiwan. Tapos ito yung nako-collect every morning doon sa kanilang mga baybayin. Kasi every morning, nagko-collect sila ng mga langis. Doon naman sa ibang lugar, ang umaabot dyan yung slick, yung nasa ibabaw na manipis pa lang na oil. Ngunit may caveat doon, yung sinabi nga nung isang scientist kanina doon sa forum, kailangan day 1 pa lang nung oil spill, alam na natin kung anong klaseng langis kasi bawat langis daw mayroong fingerprint. So alam natin itong Verde Island, bagamat napakaganda at napakayaman na karagatan, marami rin dumadaan ditong barko. So minsan kailangan i-ascertain natin kung yung langis ba nakikita ngayon sa ibang lugar, malayo doon sa malamang na kinulubugan ng barko ay yun nga ay galing sa barkong yun, o is it a new oil spill or is it something thrown from another vessel? So hindi natin alam. So sana nga yung day 1 pa lang ng oil spill, nag-fingerprinting na daw para alam natin kung itong oil spill ba na to ay talagang galing sa MT Princess Empress o baka may ibang sources. Pero so far kasi base dun sa mga reporting na nakukuha namin, tama yung modeling na ginawa ng UP Marine Science Institute kasi nung humina na yung amihan, tinansya nila na maaring bumali yung hangin pa norte at pa puntang kanluran or westwards, yung tinatawag nating northeast monsoon na nga. So doon papunta talaga yung hangin dito sa lugar namin sa may Batangas at bandang Tingloy at Mabini sa Batangas. And even sabi nila baka Kalatagan and San Juan.
Bakit kailangan malaman yung tinatawag mong fingerprint ng langis? No? Gaano ka-importante yun in terms especially of the damage that could be wrought on marine life and also, of course, on the livelihood of fishermen? And why would that take so long? Why is that hard to do? And why have they not done it since day 1?
I think siguro po yung ba't hindi siya nagawa agad, I think the agencies were busy dealing with the actual spill without really thinking more in the terms of ano ba talaga yung kailangan sa ngayon. Kasi itong scientist si Dr. Hernan, ang sabi niya is kung alam mo agad yung character ng langis, ma-determine mo unang-una kung ano yung tumatagas, di ba? Gaya ng nasabi ko kanina, is it the fuel or is it the cargo na? And then you come up with appropriate responses and then you will know kung yung langis na dumadagsa sa mga shore natin is really coming from the vessel, and then you can actually determine then kung ano yung mga posibleng approaches in cleanup. Kasi nasabi din niya sa amin last week when we were in Pola, is it really needed na lahat ng residual oil dun sa may mga batuan ay kunin or iwan na lang and allow some biological and natural remedies to deal with it. So yun yung mga kailangan pong isaalang-alang kasi if you fingerprint the oil, you know kung gaano karaming components niyan yung mawawala from evaporation, exposure sa araw, or even yung matitira at pwedeng mag-accumulate dun sa mga marine life na maaaring makain rin natin. So marami po kaya napakahalaga talaga sana nung characterization and fingerprinting na sana nagawa na agad at dati pa. Pero sabi nga po niya, nagvo-volunteer siya to do it para lang at least malinaw po sa atin. And we can be more, smart in dealing with this disaster nga. At alam natin kung saan pumupunta na yung langis at yung mga reports will be verified as well.
Mr. Ocampo, sira na yung fishing and tourism dun sa mga affected areas Tinatanong ng mga tao, under a best case scenario, gaano katagal bago yan malinis? And to revive the waters na tinamaan na nga ng pollution.
Hindi po namin masagot yan kasi so many factors should be put into yung pag-deal dun sa issue ngayon. Kasi unang-una nga, as I said, yung mga naapektuhan ng areas, some of the residual oil maaring because of wave action natatabunan. Ang sabi po kanina ni Attorney Fetizanan, isa pong councilor sa POLA, even yung inland waters nila naapektuhan na and they are supposed to harvest aquaculture produce like shrimps, prawns, and bangus. Ngayon, they cannot really do that kasi meron total ban on fishing and agricultural products from that town. Yung length of time is really dependent on how much or how quick we can actually stop how quickly we can contain yung further release ng oil, and then secondly is really knowing yung characterization or yung fingerprint ng oil, and then thirdly is to really know how much area has been damaged by that. Kasi kung ngayon po tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung paglabas ng langis, we cannot really talk about ito na yung kailangan nating ayusin. Ito na yung kailangan nating linisin. Tuloy pa po rin po yung paglalabas. Ang isang estimate na nakita ko po is 20,000 liters per day. So we're on the 20th day. If it's true na 800,000 liters yung cargo na fuel, we're talking about 40 days and we're just halfway. But recently, parang sabi, hindi daw 800, it's 900,000 liters. So ano po yung talagang, di ba, parang kailangan alam natin yung totoo, kung ilan siya, gaano karami. And thankfully, kanina daw, nandun na yung ROV, maybe it has managed to find the vessel and inspected kung lumabas ba yung cargo oil or yung fuel oil pa lang yung lumabas. And intact ba yung katawan ng barko o yung hull? So actually, hindi tatagas sana yung cargo oil. So marami pong tanong So sana talaga madaliin at yung response ng government natin is really, quick and, putting all the resources that we can have.
Pero sir, at the same time, it is the 20th day, sabi nga ninyo. And on the 20th day, saka lang dumating yung ROV that will do the ocular or try to locate the sunken vessel. So we're nowhere near halfway in terms of preventing further damage to the environment. What's your assessment of how fast we've responded to this problem? Kasi nga, we don't know when the ROV that can suck out the oil is going to come here.
Yeah. Yun nga po Actually, when we talked, I was in touch with Mayor Jennifer Cruz this morning, and she said she went out with the team who actually took the ROV para i-check yung boat. And then last week, she was informing us that the ROV that is capable of actually trying to plug the hole and maybe attach a hose to siphon the hose will take another week or so kasi kailangan daw nilang makipagtulungan pa sa ibang bansa who has those machines and technology. Pero yun nga, for us, this is really sad kasi ang tagal ng response. I mean, like we had around more than 10 major oil spills since early 2000, but still, as you can see, we're still parang in the dark on how to respond. There's not enough infrastructure. We do have the National Oil Spill Response dapat, pero even the LGUs are left in the dark how to deal with oil spills. We get questions from our local government unit partners as far as Antique, Pingloy, asking us, anong pwedeng gagawin namin? Sabi ko, we should coordinate with the Coast Guard and those agencies na in charge. You should prepare booms para man lang at least ma-prevent yung slick from reaching your coral reef areas. Because for example, the island municipality of Tingloy has 2 or 3 marine protected areas. And Isla Verde has protected areas as well. And it's the center of marine fish biodiversity. So nakakalungkot nga po talaga na 20 days na and we still don't know. We're still in the dark how much oil has come out, how much still will be coming out, or how recovery of the oil inside the vessel will be done. So sana lang yung information open. Yeah.
Laging
Sorry po.
kinukumpara to sa dun sa Guimaras oil spill, no? Oo, dahil buwan daw ang binilan lang naman, no? Parang kumbaga, it's a doable thing and no less than President Marcos has ordered na dapat 4 months daw sana matapos yan. Ano ba yun? Posible ba yun?
Mahirap po sagutin kasi 4 months is really like saying na 4 months wala nang problema, no? And then the efforts to address the needs of the communities who were displaced, the environment that was affected, and the issues that come out of the safety of being dependent on fossil fuels will be addressed. Kasi mahaba pong usapin na to like our dependence on oil, of course, is one of the issues here na dapat siguro talagang tinitingnan natin na maayos na mag-switch tayo sa clean and renewable energy. And then if you say it's 4 months po ba meaning tapos na yung clean up, or 4 months na-retrieve na yung barko or na-retrieve na yung oil dun sa ilalim? But definitely po, yung impact sa environment will be, long and lasting. Kasi based on the scientists who spoke in our forum this morning, yung mangroves that were coated by the oil and the slick, some of them will die out, some of them will not be able to grow. Yung saplings nila, yung maliliit, most of them, imbes na tumubo at lumaki, they will stop germinating. Tapos, not to mention pa po yung mga corals and the fish which will be exposed dun sa oil. So, I think 4 months is suntok sa buwan. Because if we say 4 months, huwag naman po sana natin kalimutan na yung mga mangingisda at mga komunidad na naapektuhan would need support beyond 4 months. Baka kasi sinasabing 4 months lang kasi hanggang dyan lang natin sila tutulungan. Sana naman po wag kasi doon sa Guimaras, ang haba po ng panahon na ginugol nila para ma-rehabilitate yung kanilang lugar.
In the meantime po, you touched a bit on the modeling being done by the UP Marine Science Institute. What is the modeling telling us about what's going to come in the following days? I mean, from day one, of course, we're concerned about all the islands na affected, but from day one, talagang hina-highlight din yung Verde Island Passage. Baka magpunta doon. I remember about 2 weeks ago, they were saying na, okay, mukhang, at least as far as Verde Island is concerned, mukhang papuntang south, hindi matatamaan ng Verde Island. Something shifted, obviously. Now it's there. What are we expecting in the coming days?
If the same weather condition prevails po, which is really, it's a slow shift from Amihan to Habagat, we will see more oil coming to the Verde Island Passage. I'm actually located in Mabini now. It's one of the areas in the Verde Island Passage. It's one of the LGUs. Actually, when the oil spill happened po on day one, there was even an alert that said if Amihan will not be strong, the first areas to be affected would be the local government units in the Verde Island Passage, namely from San Juan all the way to Calatagan, Batangas. But then it shifted nga. So the wind carried the oil southwards all the way to Palawan. Pero ngayong nagsishift na yung weather, we expect na hopefully, but we can expect more oil coming to the Verde Island Passage. People here have received alerts. I was informed by the Bantay Dagat that they're coordinating with the Coast Guard in Tingloy. They're preparing booms, makeshift booms with absorbent materials like old clothes, fiber, yung sacks ng onion that they fill with the coconut fiber. So they're ready, pero we hopefully will not see the worst in the next few days.
Mr. Ocampo, you mentioned the mangroves dying. What about the reefs? Yung bang mga coral kapag natakpan, nabalutan yung langis na ganyan, will they still recover? Or masisira na rin yung completely?
One thing good about nature is resilient, pero when the slick actually covers coral, it will take years for them to grow back. Kasi the fastest growing corals will only grow a few inches per year. So if they get suffocated, nag-bleach siya because of the toxins in the oil, matagal po bago mag-recover. That's why nga ang concern talaga namin is these important habitats in the Verde Island Passage and the rest of Oriental Mindoro, Palawan. These areas represent one of the areas na sa Pilipinas or the rest of the world na nandiyan yung pinakamagagandang at pinakamaraming uri ng corals and marine life. So nakakalungkot na itong trahedya po nangyari dito, but we should all work together to just deal with this now and help each other. Yun lang po yung panawagan namin, but also in the long run siguro is to really hold accountable yung nangyaring neglect in the way the vessel was allowed to sail without complete papers, or even yung mga safeguards that should have been there to ensure that if there's an oil spill or if there's an accident, then we have the necessary infrastructure to move things around to deal with the oil spill and contain it, and then later on help the communities affected and also have enough resources to do rehabilitation later on. Pero matagal pa nga po yun kasi patuloy pa rin paglabas ng oil. Sorry po.
What about the suggestion to corral the oil and burn it? That's from the UP-MSI, di ba?
Marami pong kasing ways to actually deal with the oil, no? As also shared by the scientists this morning. A big percentage of the oil is volatile, so some of them evaporate from the sunlight, mainit yung lugar natin. But of course, my background is chemical engineering. So ang lumang paraan to deal with pollution is sinasabi nga nila is the solution to pollution is dilution. But that's really old school. Parang sinasabi mo lang na out of sight, out of mind, pero kinalat mo lalo. It's the same way na yung some ways to deal with the oil spill is using dispersants. It's really na you don't see it, but you actually made it spread.
Yeah.
Made it smaller, it's there, and you added more toxins in the water through the dispersants. So right now po, what's really needed is really to contain the remaining oil that's coming out of the vessel, and yung mga lumabas na, prevent it from coming to shore and affecting people and coral reefs as much as possible. And some of them will evaporate, some of them will sink in the bottom, pero to burn it will cause the release of greenhouse gases. So marami pong impacts yan eh. So sa amin talaga is really prevent the problem. That's the most important thing.
Okay. Sir, maraming salamat po. Mr. Daniel Ocampo, Senior Campaign Manager of the Group Oceana. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Salamat po.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir. And at
Thank
this
you.
point, let's hear it from the Philippine Coast Guard. Joining us now on the phone is Captain Geronimo Tobilla. Sir, magandang gabi and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Ay, magandang gabi rin po sa inyo lahat.
Yes, sir. Sir.
Magandang gabi, sir.
Yes, sir. Welcome back,
Magandang
sir. Sir, so
Yes, sir.
what's the final word dun sa Isla Verde? Is it an oil spill talaga coming from Princess Empress, or is it something else?
Well, to be honest, I'm the designated incident commander here, the response operation in Oriental Mindoro. However, I believe na alam niyo naman po na naka-respond din naman yung mga tao natin doon from Southern Tagalog. That's
Yes, sir.
in their AOR. So, it's been in the news na ginagawa ng paraan din ng mga tao natin doon to really contain the effects of the oil spill going to Verde Island.
Ay, sir. So, sir, it's not within your jurisdiction. You're talking about Southern Tagalog, eh. You're specifically for Mindoro.
Yes, sir. That's right po. But I saw some reports then and even in the news that nakita rin naman and I received information na nagre-respond din naman tayo lahat doon, tulong-tulong. In fact, yung I was a former commander din ng Batangas and I have monitored yung mga activities doon na tulong-tulong yung local government ngayon doon ng Batangas and other stakeholders together with the Coast Guard to really respond sa kahit anumang sightings ng maliit man o malaki para lang talaga mapuksa yung effects ng oil spill.
Sige, sir. Sir, cambio lang po ako. Sir, yung ROV, good news, dumating today. Pero yun nga, that's only good for looking for the sunken boat and possibly doing an ocular. Do we have any timetables for the arrival of the ROV that will plug the hole and hopefully suction up the remaining oil?
Yes, this morning po actually it arrived here already in Calapan. And ang una nga natin ginawa dyan, ang aming liderato sa Coast Guard, sir, is really to bring the government close to the ship para yung mga other processes ng mga documentation nila, like the immigration, customs, and quarantine would be hastened para matuloy nila kagad. And having said that, yun din yung ginawa kanina. Kaya pag-arrive niya dito, nung binoard namin siya, and after a few hours when he arrived, nag-proceed na siya dun sa area ng operation natin. So he conducted an initial survey. He deployed the ROV, ng barko ng Japanese na kinumission na yon. And though we have yet to receive this afternoon yung update, we're waiting for the official report sa amin. And we have demanded the ship owner in coordination with the Japanese vessel to provide us tomorrow morning an update pertaining to their initial deployment ng ROV po.
Yeah. Kay Captain Tuvilla, Robbie Alampay po. Dagdagan ko lang yung tanong ni Ed. As we said...
Yes, Sir Robbie po. Magandang gabi po.
Ito pong pagdating ng ROV para maobserbahan na at least finally maobserbahan na kung nasan talaga, ano yung posisyon. This is all good news. It moves us forward.
Correct.
But as we
Correct
do
po.
the observation and we're waiting still for a few days for the initial report, is it possible na meron tayong worst case scenario na makita pa ng ROV na yan?
Well, ang objective ng ROV is for us to get a clear picture of what's really happening there in the bottom and to provide a solution. So, yung worst case scenario, I think yung objective ng ROV naman nasabi ko nga. And lahat naman kami dito, we're preparing for contingencies. No? Lahat ng ating members ng Unified Command natin, katuwang ang ating lokal na pamahalaan dito sa Mindoro, ay talagang puspusan ng paghahanda paglalagay ng mga protective boomings or whatever pang protection sa ating mga critical areas para talaga magipisan. Yan ang ating objektiba dito sa ating overall operation.
Napa. And just to be clear, we are all hoping for the best and hopefully even the easiest way
Of course.
To do this. But
Of course, sir.
is there a scenario po? I mean, kumbaga ang tanong ko po is, plan of attack na lang po ba ang gagawin dito nitong survey na to, or is it possible that the ROV might come up with some bad news, for example, na mukhang sensitive tong kinalalagyan ng barko, and even the next phase of the operation there are some other things to consider?
Well, like I said, we have yet to receive the initial survey that was conducted today. And we will await for that, para kami rin makita namin talaga. Kasi right now, we cannot just speculate. We're waiting for information na makukuha niyan. Kaya that is the reason why we demanded this surveyor through the coordination sa spiller na talagang bigyan kami ng updates regularly. Kung hanggang kailan tatagal itong survey na to, we have yet to find out. Ganun po yan.
Captain, may initial report, I think about a week ago, na medyo naispatan na raw yung yung barko na yan, around 400 meters deep. Paano kapag na-confirm yon at nalaman na nagli-leak yung cargo? Not just the fuel of the vessel, but the cargo. That's 800,000 liters. Anong pwedeng gawin ninyo kung sakaling yon ang makitang nangyayari ngayon?
Well, isn't that the real reason why we're doing this response? I think, yun nga po yun, yung spill na nakikita naman natin, in wide scale siya. So, we cannot just say na yung pang-konsumo ba ito nitong barko. Kasi nga, dahil sa epekto na nakikita natin. However, to provide you with the proper information pertaining to sinasabi nyo, if this is really the product ngayon na yan yung hahanapin nga na objektiba ng ROV. So pag nakita niya yung situation on the bottom, they can give us an assessment of what approaches would be done. Yan po ang natin, we are not looking after sa iba pang aspeto ng ano. Ngunit ang ating lang objektibo sa ngayon, besides the continuous response operation natin both onshore and offshore, is magkaroon tayo ng clear idea nga dun sa ilalim. At yan, and yung ROB ang makakapagsabi po sa atin yan. As long as wala tayong data pa on the bottom, we cannot just speculate po on anything.
Meron pa ho bang ibang uri ng ROV besides just collecting data or finding out exactly what's happening? In other words, meron po ba tayong ROV na I don't know, maglilinis talaga nung langis pag nalaman na kung gaano karami yun. So meron tayong inaasaang dadating na ganon.
Yes, ma'am. Yan po yung request din namin sa sealer and the insurance na provide us. Kasi meron iba't ibang klase ng ROV, no? Depende sa payload niya po na tinatawag. Meron yung magsisurvey lang na ROV, but this one, yung nakita namin on board, it has also mechanical arms. And according to
So
the
kaya
Japanese,
maglinis?
it has mechanical arms, but however, it also has limitations. And marami kasing aspeto, ma'am, no? The one that can really provide us that information is yung mga technical experts on board. And that's why tomorrow we will again ask for updates regarding their operation this afternoon.
Sir, Pablo lang, kasi I suppose it's already understood by most na yung tumatagas sa langis is not just diesel fuel anymore. It's given the volume and the color, it looks like it's already at least part of the cargo. I'm wondering lang, sir, and going back to my first question kanina, di ba, itong ang ROV na ito na dumating, pang-ocular at for survey. Are there already moves to acquire or to procure or to lease a second ROV that will do the actual repair or suctioning of the oil inside the ship? Kasi Indian po, I suppose Indian po, yun ang target natin eh. And I suppose this early we should be moving in that direction already.
Yeah, that's a good question po. In fact, yan din na-discuss namin kanina nila Governor Dolor and the Undersecretary for OCD, si Yusek Sarmiento Nepomuceno, na yan po yung ano namin na dapat meron na talaga dito. And in fact, tayo mismo, yung ating pamahalaan, is already on the move para mag-acquire tayo ng sarili natin. Para meron tayong pan-check-in balance in case may mga gantong scenario. Though, siyempre, the responsibility of the spiller is there, lalo na nung insurance. Sa gobyerno, kailangan talaga po magkaroon din tayo ng capability to have this equipment.
Yes, sir. Pero sir, wish list yan, sir. Pero that's not going to be for this particular incident. I mean, for this particular incident, meron na bang gumagalaw to get the second ROV?
Yes, sir.
And do we have a timetable for that?
Opo,
Darating na raw.
Yan po yung request natin sa kanila. Yung equipment that would really try to probably seal it or provide yung tinatawag na hot tapping and plugging.
Yes, sir.
No? Na ROV. So initially nga, nakita na namin yung ROV na dumating. And again, tandaan nyo, itong na-hire na to ay Japanese. So yung further na details, no, hinihingi namin after ng initial assessment na what will be their next step na tinatawag pertaining to our request previously na dapat yung ROV na yan ay maka-provide talaga ng solution, not just on ocular capability. So yan, dinemand na rin po natin yan previously pa po.
Yes, sir. Pero yung nga, sir, umaandar na ba yun? Yung demand
Yes.
nyo? Is it already incoming?
Opo, yan, linatag na po namin sa kanila yan. That is why hinihingi rin namin sa kanila kasi siyempre, again, kakarating lang nito dito sa atin and in fact, nagtrabaho na kagad direct from Japan, no? Binilisan yung proseso ng arrival niya, pagdating, tumrabaho na. At hindi pa namin sila totally nagkakaroon kami ng usapan dito, kaya nga po, ang napatawag pa lang namin is yung representative ng owner para bukas din po ng umaga, mag-present sila dito ng aming mga demand na ginawa rin namin from the previous engagements that we had with them. Sorry.
Okay. Captain Geronimo Tubilla, ang Incident Commander ng Philippine Coast Guard dyan po sa MT Princess Empress sinking. Maraming salamat, sir, for joining us tonight at ingat po parate.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Captain.
We are starting up another conversation right after this break, so please keep it here in One News.
The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against Russian President Vladimir Putin over alleged war crimes.
Russian President Vladimir Putin makes a surprise visit to the Russian-occupied Ukrainian city of Mariupol, just a day after being accused of war crimes by the International Criminal Court.
And Chinese President Xi Jinping is set to arrive in Moscow today, where he will be welcomed by his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. Chinese media said that Putin is looking forward to Beijing's constructive role in solving the conflict with Ukraine, following China's call for a dialogue and settlement.
An arrest warrant has been issued by the International Criminal Court for Russian President Vladimir Putin over alleged war crimes. What does this mean? Let's speak with geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian. Good evening, Richard. Welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening, as
Good evening,
always,
sir.
my pleasure.
Richard, before we get to Putin himself, I mean, maybe just an explainer here on how exactly does the ICC work on something like this? Because Russia was never a signatory of the ICC. This is different also from in the case, for example, of President Duterte in the Philippines, where we were there, we're no longer there. So medyo magkaiba yun. So how does this work in the case of Russia?
Well, actually, first of all, I thought we were going to talk about arrest of Trump. It's another thing that people are discussing. Well, medyo maaga yata pag-usapan yan.
Huwag ka mag-alala, pag-uusapan din natin yan.
I know. But going back to Putin, ang dami na ina-arrest ngayon. Mga beshi lahat yan, di ba? Trump, Putin, and then of course, pina-viral din yung picture.
Ito lang walang ma-arresto.
Putin going like that to Duterte. Going back to this, well, first of all, actually, if I'm not mistaken, Russia did not ratify, but they were actually a signatory to the ICC until 2016. So 2 years after the invasion of Crimea nung na-impose ng sanctions ng Europe and all, then Russia, I think, was preempting already something like this. So in 2016, lumabas sila. And of course, that's also the year when President Duterte wins. So maybe he was learning something here, right? Considering that twice siya bumisita sa Moscow in his term. So maybe he's learning a thing or two. And then, by the way, this concerns war crimes in Ukraine or alleged war crimes in Ukraine. And by the way, Ukraine is also not a signatory, although they requested for intervention or at least for the ICC to come in. So clearly, the two sides of the coin, which is the war crimes happening in Ukraine, allegedly by the Russians and under the order of Putin, none of them are actually, as of now, signatories or have ratified. So may clear implication nito dun sa argumento na since the Philippines have pulled out for the past 4 years or so, then hindi na applicable sa atin yan.
But Richard, every time something like this happens, I imagine people have two things on their mind. One is, uy, may silbi ang ICC. The other is, another camp will say, that will again prove na walang silbi ang ICC.
Well, speaking of Silva or no Silva, the first thing we have to keep in mind is the accusation against ISIS for a long time is they have been going against essentially Africans, right? Mostly post-colonial African leader, and then Duterte became the first Asian leader potentially to be put under investigation. Of course, it's very early to talk about it. But at the same time, you can also make the argument the other way, right? The allegations of crimes against humanity in the Philippines, these have been communicated more than 4 years ago, right? While the war in Ukraine was the other year. So some could argue that, wait lang, if it concerns the lives of Europeans or Eastern European like Ukrainian, ICC responds right away within a year. While when it comes to the Philippines, you're talking about tens of thousands of alleged EJK, 5 years now, wala pa rin result. But the way to explain that is because Ukraine has been providing all the evidence that is necessary and cooperating with ICC so that they can come up with their case and push ahead with full investigation. While in the case of the Philippines, constantly, both the Duterte administration and the Marcos Jr. administration have been resisting any significant efforts by the ICC or international investigators to come in. So clearly, dahil my investigation, my clear cooperation on the part of Ukraine, doon sa allegations, mas naging madali for ICC to come in. But nonetheless, I would argue this, to make the actual arrest of Putin,
Yes.
the barometer for how effective it is misses many things. First of all, as I said, it sets a jurisdictional precedence, right? That's an important thing. Second, it goes beyond this argument na ICC just goes after non-white people. Well, Putin is as white as you can get, right? Maybe Russia is not European in a certain sense, but he's definitely not a post-colonial leader. But more importantly, let's not forget about the fact that this is about strategic cost. Putin believes he's a world leader, right? Putin believes Russia is a global power. They have so many embassies all around the world. They want to sell armaments, oil all across the world, especially after the sanctions sila. Now, Putin has somehow a pariah status, right? Yes, he can go, for instance, to Damascus or Beijing, perhaps, but I think definitely he's not going to go to any Western capital anytime soon, or any major country for that matter. And even yung mga countries katulad ng India, which is the G20 leader this year, may mga nagtatanong, will Putin be invited to G20 considering India claims to be a democracy and part of the international community? And then baka may mga ibang countries na mga ilang sila. Like, do you want to invite someone who has a warrant of arrest on him? Because the precedence we have is the president of Sudan, no, si Bashir, no, who had to go through this country and that country to end in Beijing para hindi siya maarestuhan. I mean, can you imagine how awkward and difficult and embarrassing that's going to be for a world leader like Putin? So for me, this is also about the strategic cost. And as Russia faces more isolation, as Putin himself faces more isolation, it makes it easier for rivals to catch up. So for instance, we see India is now selling a lot of armaments, including Russian derivative armaments like BrahMos missile to the Philippines. Saudi Arabia can come in and sell even more oil if it can provide it at a good price because other countries medyo ilang sa Russia. So what I'm saying here is that obviously, hindi naman tayo nag-illusion dito. An arrest of Putin is not imminent under any conceivable circumstances. But if you just make that the barometer, you're missing the bigger picture. The bigger picture is the isolation of Russia, the moral, the legal message, and the jurisdictional precedence that this case sets. If you argue that one, then I think you better appreciate what's going on. Kasi hindi naman ilusyonado din ng ICC. Alam nila yan. Paano may arrest si Putin? Magpadala ka ng army? But Robbie, the reason why I'm saying is this because, di ba, yun din yung argument laban sa arbitration case natin sa China. Oh, bakit? Padala ka ba ng warship, pipilitin ng China? But we realized after the arbitration came out, suddenly China, hindi nila minimension yung 9-dash line. Suddenly, ang US, ginagamit yung arbitration award natin para magpadala ng mga barko dyan sa West Philippine Sea for freedom of navigation. Suddenly, you see more and more countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, questioning China's claims. Do you get what I'm saying? So, instead of talking about 10, which is the arrest, let's talk about 1 to 6. A lot of things can happen here, and that's where the geopolitics comes in. But as I said, the jurisdictional issue also is very important because now it's harder for the Philippine government to say, hindi na tayo parte, so wala kayong paki sa amin. Well, you cannot make that argument because now you have a clear precedence here. Or ICC cannot make that.
Pero anong epekto
China, no? Xi Jinping is now in Moscow.
Right.
And he's mediating, no? He's, ano daw yun, yung peace trip niya yun eh. What can China do actually in this conflict?
Right. So China is kind of trying to have the cake and eat it too, right? So on one hand, evidence is coming out that China is actually providing armaments or drones and some technology, helmet support to Russia, right, in the war against Ukraine. And so you see the evidence is coming out. Politico magazine had a very detailed report on this. We have been seeing that over the past 24 hours. So that kind of, complicates China's claim to be a neutral arbiter, right? Because clearly there's an evidence suggesting otherwise. In fact, what makes it more weird is the allegation is that Turkey, a NATO member, may have been kind of an intermediary here. So that creates a lot of headache for, like, how are we going to respond now? So there's now pressure on Biden to come up with a response, maybe sanction the Chinese company involved or some of the top Chinese officials. So that's the one big thing we want to look at. But remember, where is she coming from? China just finalized a massive diplomatic deal, or at least oversaw this Iran-Saudi Arabia deal, two massive oil-producing countries and superpowers in the Middle East. So medyo yung feeling ng China is, diba, they're coming in with confidence, right? And more than that, of course, there's a global security initiative na forward ng China whereby they're presenting themselves as a global leader. Now, wag na kayo umasa sa West, bias mga yan. Tignan mo yung ginawa nila sa Iraq. Wala naman ano yan, mga hypocrite yan. Dito na kayo sa amin. So, I think that's where she is coming, especially after 3 years of lockdown and everything like that. But most importantly, yes, she's gonna shake Putin's hands. They're gonna be nice and all. But we know China. They're gonna juice it out because Russia has to sell them cheap gas, cheap oil, cheap everything because now they're the junior partner. Again, this is what people don't realize. You know, Russia 5-10 years ago, when it dealt with China from a position of strength, of parity. That's no longer the case right now. So this ICC case will even further isolate Russia and strengthen the position of China. So China and India right now can then extricate maximum concessions from Russia on the armaments fronts, on the oil and gas front. So is that good strategically for Russia? I don't think so.
Okay, Prof, cambio naman ako.
Dito na tayo kay Trump.
Kay Trump na.
Para sa'yo.
I was preparing for that.
Mas salacious to. Yeah, so, okay, what do you make of this so-called arrest? I mean, siya pa ang nag-announce at nagtatawag ng protest, di ba, yung mama. Right. What is this? What kind of political move is this? And will this succeed? More to the point is, mukha bang mananalo to pag tumakbo?
Right. Of course, unlike ICC, which is an international court, American courts have enforcement capacity, right? So this is a national court. That's the number one difference, right? Now, iba na yung usapan logistics. How are you going to get him from Florida in his mansion in Mar-a-Lago all the way to New York, right? Or, I mean, let's see what protests are going to happen. But the craziest thing I've heard is, Professor Dershowitz, a very pro-Trump person, arguing that there's nothing in the Constitution in the U.S. that bars him from running for elections and even governing America from prison, if ever. Kasi dalawang charges, misdemeanor or felony. If misdemeanor ang mangyari dun sa hush money issue, I don't know if you want to go on the details of that on national
Stormy
TV.
Daniels?
Right, exactly, right.
Stormy.
Google it themselves, right? Those are hush money. Either he might get a misdemeanor, which is just a fine, he's gonna pay it, or at most he might get a felony charge, which is up to 4 years. But many people are very suspicious that could happen. So baka at most we're talking about felony. Again, this is where it's important to look at the political context. So this is going to make it easier for Ron DeSantis, his number one rival. Some would say the fresher, younger model in the room, right? Like that's the joke, right? He's the to come in and say, "Come on, Trump." I mean, he might be exciting, guys, but marami siyang sabit, diba? So maybe you want to rally behind me. In fact, that's exactly the strategy of DeSantis. If you've noticed, Ron DeSantis is a very spirited guy. He's a tough-talking guy. He has been very silent. He barely says anything against Trump because he wants to get the Trump supporters to rally behind him just in case naging masyado na mabigat yung mga kaso. Kasi may isa pang kaso si Trump, diba? Yung sa Georgia elections naman. Now, there's an accusation that his camp put pressure and all. So baka malasanya siya ng legal cases. Not something that Trump is not used to, but DeSantis is now very competitive. A lot of surveys are saying head-to-head, DeSantis is way ahead. And in national elections, DeSantis is far more competitive. In fact, he could perhaps even beat Biden in elections that comes next year. So this is what I'm watching. What's happening inside the Republican Party and how the other rivals are going to make the most out. Even if misdemeanor lang yung maging case in Donald Trump.
But isn't there a sizable segment of the American population that loves that kind of a candidate? Yung parang,
underdog.
Hit from all sides. Parang feeling mo
Maverick.
Underdog
zombie apocalypse eh.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely he can try to spin this into a Rocky Balboa case. I mean, we don't even know if the arrest claim by Trump is even, legit. Because some are saying, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So this is really a Trumpian way of making himself relevant. You can call him headlines Karen, right? Or ano bang lalaki ng Karen, right? Like, he's so good in putting himself into the news. I mean, we almost forgot to talk about Putin because suddenly now yung arrest case ni Trump ang chinecheck natin lahat, diba? So this could be a way for him to preempt not only the legal aspect, but to turn himself into kind of a martyr, right, of the Republican cause. So this is where medyo kinakabahan din yung mga ibang karibal niya. I mean, Trump will definitely use this out to present himself as the victim, as the man against the machine. So it's going to be a lot of theatrics based or so, even if he will not be charged with anything. Now, if you're a Democrat, you're Biden, you're not sure if you're happy where these things are going, right? You'd rather...
No, yun nga tatanong ko whether it's Trump or DeSantis, how are the Republicans shaping up in this election?
Actually, I think there's a lot of confidence by establishment Republicans that DeSantis is the more competitive candidate, but their fear is DeSantis is not good in debates. We saw that already in the gubernatorial fights against his counterparts, Democrats and all. Like ako, as someone who was a trained debater during college and all, it's like I'm worried for DeSantis. Like if he goes against Trump, baka Trump will pull it out and make it
against the Democrats.
Oh,
against Biden.
Right.
How are they shaping up in that fight, at least for now? If elections were held now, will the Republicans come up ahead?
No, as I say, it depends who's going to be the candidate, right? If it's Trump...
Well, whether it's Trump or DeSantis.
Well, as far as the Democrat is concerned, I think they already know what is going to be the line of attack on them, right? I mean, they have already seen so many nasty attacks against Biden, including they're going to make a big issue of Biden's age, right? He's going to be, 80, 81? So there's going to be a lot of attack on him, really nasty, ad hominem attack. But we saw, I mean, if you watch the State of the Nation address, sorry, that's Philippines. State of the Union address. Right? State of the Union address ni Biden just the other month, di ba? Parang tina-trash talk siya sa gitna ng talk na ni Marjorie Greene. But he comes back. So, medyo balahura din eh. Biden likes this. So I think Biden would love a Trump showdown. But even if it comes down to DeSantis, I think Biden, could do it. Could do what Trump is doing. It's going to be a wild elections.
Anyway, Richard, as you pointed out, this is something that we will all continue to watch heading into the elections. Pero Tuesday muna ang abangan natin kung may mangyayari talaga kay Donald Trump. In the meantime, we've run out of time. Maraming salamat ulit, Richard Haydarian.
As always, pleasure, guys.
Richard. And that's all we have for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Paminto ng Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez, News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.